Hello and welcome to the show. When I saw the Maserati Tipo had been released on Forza 5, I felt I had to kind of do a review of this car because it really is a rather excellent car. However, it's kind of hard to explain the appeal of this car to sort of non-car enthusiasts. It doesn't have the racing heritage of a lot of classic race cars. While it was a very competitive race car in its day, it never won the Le Mans 24-hour race, which was the big prestigious event. Yeah, it did win a couple of Nürburgring 1,000-kilometre races, but it never had the reliability, being a typical Maserati, to win the Le Mans 24 hours. It's also not the best looking of the classic race cars. From the back, it does remind me a little bit of a bathtub. From the side, things get a little bit better, but it still looks sort of slightly lumpy, slightly out of proportion. And from the front, again, it's still a slightly odd-looking car. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a sad fish. It's not the best looking of cars, especially when you compare it to the likes of the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, the Jaguars, the Aston Martins of the day. So yeah, it's an odd car, this one. It's an oddly shaped car. And inside as well is not particularly exciting. It's rather cramped. There's a battery in the passenger footwell. The rear view mirror takes up most of the front visibility. It's not exactly luxurious or particularly glamorous of classic cars. However, it was designed to go racing, and it is very fast. One of the most interesting things I find about this car is the chassis. While this wasn't the first ever car to have this sort of lattice space frame style of chassis, it was probably one of the most well known. It got its nickname the Birdcage because of it. And this kind of chassis was very rare back at that time. Very few race cars were using this kind of technology. Also, I like how the fact that most of it is exposed. You can see a lot of it just sort of behind the windscreen, which I think is kind of cool. And this chassis is a good thing when it comes to racing. It means that the car can be a lot more rigid. However, it doesn't weigh very much, so the car can be very light. And both of those things are what you want when it comes to racing. And this car is incredibly light. It weighs just 1,323 pounds. Which is less than the original Mini. Now, when you put a sort of 250 horsepower engine into a car that weighs that little, the effect on the performance is rather profound, shall we say. 0 to 60 in this car takes just 3.9 seconds. That's quick by today's standards, let alone for a car made in 1961. That's ridiculously fast for a car. You look at the sort of the contemporary rivals to this vehicle, the likes of a Ferrari 250 GTO. 0 to 60 time for that car takes 6 seconds. And well, that was pretty damn quick for the period. This is 2.1 seconds faster than it. It's a really rather impressive 0 to 60 time. You look at the likes of the Shelby Daytona Ford GT40 even. Can't beat this car when it comes to getting to 60. 0 to 100 is also pretty damn quick at 9.1 seconds. The likes of the Shelby and the Ford are quicker when it gets to that because they just have more power. The Ford's almost got 500 horsepower, but that still is not massively quicker to 100 than this vehicle. The acceleration on this thing is absolutely phenomenal. Even you compare it to modern day cars, the Camaro ZL1. The most recent Camaro ZL1, 0 to 60, 3.8 seconds, and that has 600 horsepower, or near enough, and this car is only 0.1 of a second off it. Yeah, the acceleration on this thing is absolutely ridiculous. Caught me out the first time I drove this car, just how fast it accelerates, because you don't expect it from a car of this age. Yeah, it's really a rather impressive car when it comes to the acceleration front. However, there are some downsides. It is a bit tricky to drive. When you put a lot of power in a car that doesn't weigh very much, if you've ever driven a Lotus 11 on Forza 4 with a lot of power, they do become rather twitchy, and that makes them very difficult to drive. There's a lack of downforce in this car, which means the back end will step out quite a lot. It was very easy to get it sliding, which means that it can be a little bit of a handful through the corners. Of course, it doesn't help that this car has rather old suspension and rather old tyres, which is just going to add to the problems. It's just putting the power down out of the slow speed corners that this car really does struggle with, or it can struggle with, I should say. With a bit of practice, you will get the hang of driving this thing. It is just a bit of a pain. It can be quite difficult to drive at times. However, because it doesn't have huge amounts of power, it has only got 250 horsepower, if you do get things a little bit wrong, like you will see me do here at the final corner at Sebring, you can normally save it. If it does start sliding and you try and correct it, you're probably not going to have a massive crash. You might spin it in the end, but you can normally keep it just about under control. The other downside, as with all sort of classic race cars, is the brakes are not particularly good. It does take a bit longer to get stopped than you're expecting. Part of that is down to the fact that this car accelerates so fast it can sometimes approach corners quicker than you're expecting it to, and also with the not very good brakes, you will have to brake a bit earlier than you would be expecting, than you would normally for a car like this. But having said all of that, the speed of this thing, acceleration of this thing is fantastic. I really do quite like this car. There were a couple of different variations of the Tipo. I believe, I think it's the 60 or the 63 Tipo was mid-engined, and Maserati threw all sorts of engines in it. At some point, I believe they had a V12 from a Formula 1 car. I don't know if I'd want to drive that. I think that would be a little bit scary with that much power in a car that weighs this little. With old tyres and old... Yeah, I think that would be utterly, utterly terrifying. As this car goes, I really do quite like it. It's good fun to drive. It can be a little bit difficult to drive. It will take a bit of getting used to, but once you are used to it, it's an excellent car. Great fun to drive, and I really would recommend it. It does cost a lot. It's over 1 million credits to buy this car, but I really would recommend it, and it is a fantastic, fantastic car to drive. Now it is time to hand it over to the Stig and see what sort of lap time he can get out of this car. Now, we haven't had that many cars go around the test track on Forza 5, so there's not a massive amount of competition, if you like, for the Tipo. Its main rival is going to be the Shelby Cobra. That's the only car that this is even vaguely close to, sort of class-wise. So it'll be interesting to see how it compares to that car, considering they were roughly around the same sort of age as well. As you come through Chicago, you can see how much this car, it's just moves around. You can put the pad out, you can see it's wobbling its way down the straight. It is a difficult car to drive. It can be a bit of a pain putting power down out of the slower corners. A hammerhead is another area which the car appears to struggle on, a bit wobbly under braking, and it's just putting the power down and stopping the wheels from spinning, because it does want to slide quite a lot. Can't quite decide what that's down to. If it's down to lightness, if it's down to old tyres, all of it's probably a contributing factor. Also a little bit bumpy out of hammerhead, and through the higher speed corners can be a little bit scary due to the lack of downforce. You can see it going sort of almost sideways through the follow through past the tyre walls. It's going a little bit sideways as well. However, in between corners it is very, very fast, and that is where this is going to sort of make up its lap time. Come up towards the second to last corner, it's going sideways. Stick enters that corner, and around the final corner, and everything is a little bit more under control, and the Maserati is across the line. Yeah, a little bit of a scary car to drive, this one, sometimes. Medium speed corners are pretty good with it. It can have issues with some other corners. However, the Maserati did put in a very impressive lap time of 1:22.803. That puts it 7 thousandths of a second faster than a Shelby Cobra. Not a huge amount, I know, but that's... I'm surprised that beat the Shelby, because although the Shelby again is another car that struggles with older tyres, brakes, and so on. But yeah, that is an impressive time from the Maserati. It's only, what is it, 7/10 of a second off an Audi RS5. Yeah, that is a pretty damn quick car. It will be a bit of a struggle keeping it under control sometimes. I would imagine if you put big fat race tyres on it, big brakes, and all of that kind of thing, I'd imagine this would be a very, very good car. As it is, yeah, it will take a bit of getting used to. It will be a bit scary. You probably will spin it at some point. However, I would highly recommend this car. I really would. It's an excellent car, excellent piece of engineering, and yeah, I really do quite like it. However, that is it for this video, guys. So thank you very much for watching. If you have cars you would like to see us review, or any sort of challenges you would like to see us do, please do let me know in the comment section. I will have a look through, and my favourites will be in a video at some point. However, until next time, goodbye.